had lived for about 6 months. Pinterest boards full of wine barrels and lavender fields, mismatched bridesmaid dresses, rustic chic nonsense. But in the end, Linda said it was too far from town. Said her son deserved something elevated. And so they chose the country club outside Santa Barbara. Not for beauty, not for closeness, for image. It sat on a hill like something that didn't belong. Rows of green rolled out unnaturally in every direction, groomed like it was afraid to be wild. Marble statues, an indoor-outdoor ballroom. String lights hung from white metal poles that had never seen rust. The entire place smelled like money. Clean, polished, antiseptic. I was seated near a service exit. It wasn't a mistake. The place cards had been printed a week in advance. I remember Linda spending hours on them, fussing over calligraphy styles like a general drawing battle plans. Everyone else was placed with precision. Aunts with cousins, childhood friends next to groomsmen, his biological father at the center. And me, positioned between a rolling cart of empty champagne flutes and a swinging door that led to a hallway I wasn't meant to see. There was no room for accidents in that seating chart. I wasn't forgotten. I was placed. My name sat in gold script on a tent card. Michael Allen. Not dad. Not stepdad. Just the name of the man who paid for the tent, the food, the tuxedos, the open bar. The man who held up the roof while everyone else played house beneath it. I sat with strangers. A couple who worked with the groom's fiancé. One of her professors, I think. A +1 who never introduced herself. We made small talk like passengers on a delayed flight. They didn't know who I was. Why would they? I wasn't introduced. I wasn't listed in the program. My role had no name. They served steak. Perfectly cooked. Medium rare. Tender. Plated with roasted vegetables that tasted of butter and indifference. I chewed in silence while laughter rang out from the head table. There, in the center of it all, was Tom Harris. He arrived late. Of course he did. They all laughed when he walked in, grinning with that effortless charm he wears like a tailored suit. Tan, fit, hair just gray enough to suggest wisdom, not decline. He's the kind of man people root for even when they shouldn't. The kind who makes you forget how often he's failed. He walked in, kissed Linda on the cheek. Yes, kissed her, and was handed a microphone before the main course had been cleared. No rehearsal, no notes. Just a napkin tucked into his collar and a story about how he cried the day his son was born. They applauded like he'd cured something. He didn't cry when he left, though. He didn't cry when he missed child support payments or birthdays or the ER visit after that broken wrist. He didn't cry when he moved 3 states away to figure things out, or when he ghosted Christmas for 4 years in a row. He cried. Quietly. Alone. In the bedroom, in the car, in the garage where no one could hear me. I cried when I couldn't figure out how to pay tuition and the heater broke in the same week. I cried when his son called me Mike after 5 straight years of fatherhood. But Tom? He cried once and it made him a hero. Linda clapped loudest. She looked radiant that night. Dark blue dress, diamonds I bought her. Makeup done by a professional she swore she didn't need but booked anyway. She smiled more that night than I had seen her smile in months. Maybe years. Every laugh she gave to Tom felt like an audit of the last 15 years. I was the man who had cleaned up her past, and still it was the past she honored. I caught her watching him during the speeches. Her mouth tilted in a way I recognized from our first few years together. That look. Admiration mixed with nostalgia. The way a person looks at an old photograph of themselves, thinner, younger, before time made everything harder. She hadn't looked at me that way in a long time. I shifted in my chair, the seat too narrow, the fork too polished. The whole evening had the feel of a play I had wandered into halfway through. I knew the script, but none of the actors acknowledged me. The lighting hit everyone else. I was in the wings, watching. I thought about the money. Not just the wedding, that was around $43,000, give or take. I counted it every cent. But that wasn't what weighed on me. It was the 15 years before it. The small bleeding that never stopped. His freshman year tuition, $17,200. Rent for 3 years, $21,000. Emergency dental surgery, $2,800. A used car, $5,600. Summers abroad. Textbooks. A new laptop every other year. Therapy. Copays. Phone bills. Gas cards. Groceries. Every temporary problem became my lifelong debt. Linda never asked directly. She didn't need to. She'd sigh near the bills. She'd say things like, "I just want him to have what he needs." Or worse, "You've always been so good at fixing things." And God help me, I convinced myself that being useful was love. That maybe if I did enough, fixed enough, paid enough, the title would come. One day he'd call me Dad. One day, Linda would put her hand on mine and say, "None of this would have been possible without you." Instead, they gave Tom a toast. I sat back in my chair and watched as Linda and Tom posed for photographs with the bride and groom. I watched as guests clinked glasses and swayed to music I couldn't hear anymore. I watched as the man who hadn't been there walked into their hearts like he'd never left. And I, who never left, was nowhere to be found. No speech. No thanks. Not even a nod from the stage. I wasn't family. I wasn't even history. I was a placeholder with a checkbook. The man who stood still while the ones who left got all the glory. I left the reception before the cake was cut. No one noticed. Linda texted me 2 hours later. "Everything okay? You disappeared." I stared at that message for a long time. I considered replying with the truth. I considered saying, "I disappeared 15 years ago. Tonight just made it official." But I didn't. I typed, "Tired. Heading home." She didn't respond. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the house breathe without me. I thought about all the things I had missed. Vacations skipped, hobbies abandoned, promotions turned down, because I wanted to be a pillar for someone else's foundation. But the house was built without me. I was just the scaffolding. I thought about how long I had played my part. Dutiful, reliable, silent. A man who confused sacrifice for love and endurance for belonging. It didn't happen that night, the break. But the first crack came then. Sitting beside a service door, cutting into meat I paid for, watching my wife and her ex-husband laugh under lights I strung with my own hands. That's when I realized they had built a family. I had built a transaction. And the receipt was finally coming due. 3 days passed. The wedding was still being talked about like it was some fairy tale. Photos circulating, comments flooding in. "So beautiful. What a perfect day. Love the parents' speeches." The parents. Not me. Linda's face was in most of the pictures. Her hair curled soft around her shoulders. Her smile aimed at Tom. Even the photographer caught it. Angle after angle, her turn just slightly toward him, like gravity hadn't changed at all in 15 years. I wasn't in a single frame. Not one. I stood in the doorway of our kitchen that morning, scrolling through the photos on social media while the coffee brewed. The sound of the drip filled the silence between us. Linda sat at the table, her robe tied neatly, legs crossed, her phone glowing against her palm. She hadn't looked at me all morning. "You looked happy," I said. She didn't answer at first, just kept scrolling. Then, without lifting her eyes, "It was a good day. A good day." That's what she called it. I stared at the back of her head, the neat slope of her shoulders. This woman I had supported for over a decade, who knew every sleepless night I'd spent wondering how we would make it through another month. She had cried in my arms when her son was expelled his first year, when the bank called about the second mortgage, when the dog we'd rescued had to be put down. I was the one who held her. But that morning, she barely acknowledged me. Later that day, I came home from work to find her sitting in the living room with her laptop open, a spreadsheet pulled up, her fingers clicking slowly across the keyboard. She didn't look up when I entered. The room smelled of citrus cleaner and silence. "I was thinking," she said without preamble, "it might be better if you step aside for a while." I didn't understand the words at first. They arrived too softly, like an apology wrapped in cotton. "What?" She looked up at me then. Her expression was clinical. Not angry, not emotional, just tired. She adjusted her glasses and repeated it. Slower, clearer. I think you should stop involving yourself in family matters for a bit. Just step back. The phrase made my spine go rigid. Step back. I waited for her to soften it, to explain it was temporary, a misunderstanding. She didn't. What does that mean? I asked. She set the laptop aside, folded her hands in her lap. It means you've done enough. You don't need to carry everything anymore. You've been generous, Michael. But maybe it's time to let others step in. Others? She looked away. Tom wants to be more involved now. It's important for their bond. Their bond. 15 years. 15 years of cutting checks, of driving to parent-teacher conferences, of showing up when no one else would. And now I was in the way. You're serious, I said. You want me to step aside so Tom can be the father again. She didn't answer. That was her answer. I felt something in my chest go still. Not rage. Not pain. Just a quiet, final silence. Like a door swinging shut in the dark. I left the room. I walked to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed where I had folded laundry for years, where I had balanced budgets, rubbed her feet, held her when the weight of her past collapsed in her chest. I sat there with my hands on my knees, staring at nothing, listening to the house continue without me. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't just unappreciated, I was being removed. I was being edited out of the narrative. The placeholder had fulfilled his function. The real cast had returned. And so I made a choice. I didn't yell. I didn't pack a bag or slam a door. I didn't demand to be heard, or cry, or ask her to reconsider. I simply stopped being convenient. That night, I opened my laptop. First, I went into the bank portal. I had long ago linked multiple accounts to make everything seamless. Tuition payments, rent transfers, credit cards for emergencies, grocery money, allowances, gas, utilities. I unlinked them, every single one by one. I didn't rush. This wasn't revenge. It was math. A man pays into a system and one day he audits it. I opened the tuition account, private portal, institution name, 4 tabs deep, and canceled the auto payment. A prompt asked if I wanted to notify the student. I clicked no. Next was the apartment rent. I had co-signed. I pulled my name from the lease guarantee. I called the landlord directly. Explained I was no longer responsible. He stammered. I didn't waver. The pocket money card was easy. I had set it up myself, loaded it monthly with a few $100s so there was always enough for groceries, dates, weekend drives. I logged in, opened the settings, and turned off all transfers. Then I set the balance to 0. Gone. All of it. I moved to shared utilities next: cell phone family plan, internet, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify. Click, 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 canceled, disconnected, removed, not with malice, with precision. By the end of the night, the only thing I still shared with them was a mailing address. And even that, I began to rethink. 3 days later, I got a call. It wasn't from Linda. It wasn't from her son. It was a lawyer. His voice was cool, polite, the kind that bills by the minute and never stumbles. He introduced himself as representing Linda Harris. He said she had some preliminary questions regarding shared assets and obligations. I remember that phrase, preliminary questions. That's when it hit me. Stepping aside wasn't a request. It was a plan, a transition. My erasure sanitized through legal language. She had waited until the wedding was over, until the photographs were printed and posted, until Tom had been reintegrated, until there was no further use for me. Then she pushed the button. I didn't argue with the lawyer. I didn't ask for clarification. I simply said I would get back to him. Then I hung up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a drink. Just water, but it burned like something stronger, and sat in the silence of a house that wasn't mine anymore. I didn't speak to Linda that night. She was in the other room, watching TV, laughing at something on the screen. I wondered if it was Tom again, if they were texting, reconnecting, rebuilding, using the bones I had laid for the foundation. I listened to her laugh and thought, this is what happens when you give everything. They take it and then they take more. And when there's nothing left to take, they hand it back, broken. I stayed up late. Not thinking, not planning, just sitting. The weight was gone. And in its place something colder, cleaner. I was done. It didn't take long for the silence to get loud. 3 days after the lawyer called, the cracks began to show. At first, they were small. A text from her son. Short, casual, a question about whether I had forgotten to refill the gas card. I didn't respond. The second text came later that night, less casual. The card's empty. Did something happen? I turned off the phone. In the morning, Linda asked if I had seen the messages. I said I had. Well, she said, leaning against the counter. I didn't forget anything, I told her. She stared at me, waiting for more. I poured coffee, took a sip, walked past her like she was part of the furniture. That was the beginning. The tuition notice arrived next. Thick envelope. University logo. Linda opened it in the kitchen while I read the news on my tablet. I heard the sound of the seal tearing. Then the pause. Then the rustle of paper being pulled from its sleeve. I didn't look up. Michael, she said slowly. This is saying tuition hasn't been paid. I know. She blinked. You know? I nodded once. Sipped my coffee. She walked around the island and held out the letter. I didn't take it. You canceled it? I did. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. She looked at the paper again like it might change its meaning. Then at me. Why? Because I was told to step aside. I took it seriously. The words hit her like glass under bare feet. Her voice dropped. That wasn't what I meant. I nodded. Maybe not, but it's what you said. She tried to argue, to walk it back. But I was already putting on my coat. The mug clicked on the counter. My keys in my hand. Michael, she called as I opened the door. He doesn't have anyone else. That's not what I heard at the wedding. The door closed behind me. By the time I got home that evening, the storm had broken. Her son was there. Back from campus, his car in the driveway, the front door slightly ajar like he hadn't even bothered to shut it properly. He was pacing the living room, sweat on his brow, face red with panic. Linda hovered nearby, wringing her hands like she was watching a child drown. Michael, he snapped the moment I stepped in. What the hell is going on? I hung up my coat, took my time. You shut off the rent, he barked. They called, said it bounced, said I've got 5 days before they start the process of kicking me out. Are you insane? I walked past him, sat down, loosened my shoes. No, just awake. His jaw tensed. You're ruining everything. You can't just cut people off. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't cut you off. You did. The night you decided I wasn't part of your family. The night you let your real father take the credit. The night you called me nothing. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. He paced again, running a hand through his hair. Okay, look, maybe I was out of line, but you don't get to just destroy my life over a sentence. You're right, I said. It wasn't just a sentence. It was clarity. He stopped. What the hell does that mean? It means I heard you. I finally listened. You've been saying it for years. In every shrug, every look past me, every time you called me by my first name while cashing my checks. And now, you're standing here asking for help. Help from a man you buried the second someone with your bloodline showed up. His voice cracked. I didn't ask for this. I didn't choose him. You did, I said. At the wedding, at the dinner table. Every time you celebrated his presence and erased my sacrifice. Linda stepped in then, her voice low. Michael, please. He's just scared. So was I said. For 15 years. Scared of failing you. Scared of not being enough. But I kept going. I kept giving. Because I believed, stupidly, that being present mattered more than blood. There was a silence. One of those heavy ones. The kind that sits on the chest. Then he said it. Please, he whispered. I'm sorry. I believe he meant it. But sorry is a currency that loses value when it's only spent in desperation. I looked at him. I looked at the young man I had raised, protected, carried for more than a decade. And I said nothing. He left the house that night, slammed the door so hard a photo fell from the wall. I didn't pick it up. The next day, the phone calls began. First the university, then the landlord, then Linda's voice trembling through another lawyer's voicemail. I ignored them all. Instead, I made a list. Every account, every guarantee, every quiet act of support I had performed over the years without thanks or acknowledgement. I found them all, and I severed the ties. The car I bought him, still in my name. I reclaimed it, had it towed from the parking lot of his apartment. The medical insurance he never asked about, I removed him from the policy. The credit card I kept for emergencies, canceled. By the end of the week, he wasn't just unsupported, he was exposed. No backup plan, no hidden safety net, just the reality he had always denied. That I was the man who made his life possible. And now I wasn't. Linda tried once more. She came into the office where I was sitting, eyes red, voice small. "He's scared," she said. "He's not equipped to handle this. You've built his whole life. You can't just walk away." I looked at her for a long time. Then I asked, "Whose fault is that?" She had no answer. Because she knew. She knew I had been more than a husband, more than a provider. I had been the spine of this family, the quiet force that made things function. And she let them pretend I was disposable. I stood. "I'm done explaining myself," I said. "You made a choice. He made a choice. Now I'm making mine." That night, I took my things from the bedroom, moved into the guest room. A small thing, but it meant everything. Linda didn't stop me. The lawyer called again. I didn't answer. The university called to say the semester was in jeopardy. I deleted the voicemail. Her son showed up on the doorstep. Knocked until his knuckles turned red. I sat in the back room with the lights off. He left. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. It was the realization that obligation without respect is a prison. That love, when unreciprocated, becomes servitude. That silence isn't peace. It's slow erasure. And I had been erased long enough. So I stepped out of the role they had written for me. Quietly, permanently, and let the house echo without my presence. The house quieted after I moved into the guest room. Not the kind of quiet people long for. Not peace. The air was too tight for that. It was the silence of things unsaid. Things broken. Like a structure abandoned mid-renovation. Walls stripped bare, wires exposed, echoes where warmth used to be. Linda barely spoke. She'd passed me in the hallway like a stranger, eyes flicking toward me, then away. There were no fights, no slammed doors, just detachment, a shared cold, like the heat had been turned off and neither of us wanted to be the one to admit it. Her son didn't come home anymore. Once I caught her on the phone with him in the kitchen, her voice low, trying to soothe. She said things like, "We'll figure it out," and "He's just going through something." I walked past her without stopping. Her eyes followed me like I was something foreign, something unrecognizable. She didn't stop the call. She just lowered her voice and turned her back. I stopped making coffee in the mornings, stopped asking if she needed anything from the store. We lived in the same space but no longer in the same life. And neither of us tried to fix it. The boy, her son, sent me an email a week later. Subject line, "Please." I didn't open it. Another came the next day. And another. Then one from a different address. Then a text. Then a voicemail. I played none of them. I didn't need to. The message was already clear. And too late. They were circling the wreckage now, trying to gather what was left, not because they missed me, but because they needed what I used to provide. Protection. Resources. Control. The man who paid the bills. The man who solved things. Not the man himself. That man was gone. I saw Linda crying once. It was late, nearly midnight. I come out of the guest room to get water. The hallway light was off, but the living room was lit by the TV, sound muted. She sat curled on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, her shoulders trembling. I didn't ask why. I didn't comfort her. She had made her choice the moment she said, "Step aside." The moment she let another man stand in my place while I paid for the champagne. She saw me standing there. We locked eyes, her face wet, mascara smudged. I waited for her to speak. She didn't, so I walked back to my room. 3 more weeks passed. The lawyer followed up twice, first through voicemail, then email. He asked again if I intended to contest anything, if I had a position on asset separation. I replied once, "You can take what you want. I'm not coming back." I think Linda expected a fight, expected me to cling, to ask for clarity. She didn't understand that the moment I saw her smile at Tom like she used to smile at me, I had already left. The rest was just the paperwork. Then came the last attempt. A Sunday evening. The sky soft with late light. The front door rattled with a knock. Not a tap. A need. I knew who it was before I opened it. Her son stood on the porch. He didn't look like the boy I raised. He looked older. Not wiser, just more tired. His shirt wrinkled. Hair unwashed. Eyes hollow. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me like he was waiting for permission to exist. "I have nothing left," he said eventually. "I tried calling Dad. He won't pick up. Won't respond. I can't stay in the apartment. I've been couch hopping. I'm out of money. School's dropped me from the system." He swallowed hard. I was wrong. 3 words. Late. Brittle. Covered in dirt and panic. I know what I said at the wedding. I know what I said before. I didn't mean it. I was angry. I was trying to impress people. I didn't know how much you'd done. He stepped forward. "I need help." That's what it always came down to. Not love. Not family. Help. I looked at him. Looked through him. "Do you remember when you were 13? I said. "And you got caught stealing from the pharmacy down the street?" He blinked. "You came home with the police." Linda cried. "You told them I wasn't your father, that they couldn't talk to me. But when your mom collapsed, it was me who stepped forward, who signed the forms, who spoke for you." He nodded slowly. "I kept doing that. For years. Every time something went wrong, I spoke for you, paid for you, stood for you. And the first time you had a stage, the first time people looked, you gave that credit to a man who mailed birthday cards without returning calls." His lips quivered. "I know. And I'm sorry." I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. He flinched like I was about to hit him, but I didn't raise my hand. I raised my voice. "You said I wasn't your father, that I had no place. And now you're here because the man whose name you wear won't pick up the phone." "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't think." "No," I interrupted. "You didn't, because I made life too easy for you to see what it cost. You had a safety net so deep you never looked down. And now that it's gone, you think you can climb back up. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll work. I'll do whatever. You can't pay me back." He froze. "No one can. Not for 15 years of sacrifice. Not for being erased and then called back only when the lights went out." "I'll change," he said. "Please, just let me fix it." I stepped closer, my voice low, not angry, just finished. "You broke something that doesn't get rebuilt. Respect isn't a second chance game. You want a future? Build it. You want redemption? Earn it. But not here. Not from me." He took a shaky breath. His mouth opened, closed again. "Tell your mother," I said, "that the door's locked, that I won't be back, that whatever life she builds next, she builds without me." And then I walked inside. I didn't wait for him to leave. I didn't check the window. I sat on the couch and watched the sun bleed through the blinds like something wounded. In the morning, his car was gone. So was Linda. I don't know where they went. I didn't ask. I stayed in the house another week. Packed slowly. Left the guest room last. On the final night, I stood in the center of the kitchen. Looked at the grooves in the table I'd sanded myself. The cabinets I'd painted after work. The floor I'd laid tile by tile, sweating through weekends. It had been a house. I had tried to make it a home. Now it was neither. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I closed the door behind me and left the keys on the porch. I live smaller now. Not bitter. Not broken. Just clean. I wake when I want, eat when I'm hungry, work because I choose to. My money stays in my account. My time belongs to me. The silence isn't sharp anymore. The still, honest. And in that stillness, I've learned something simple. Love must be returned. Respect must be mutual. Anything else is servitude. I spent 15 years giving everything, hoping it would eventually be seen. That the boy would grow and realize, that the woman would look at me and finally understand the cost. But they didn't. Not until the power went out. Not until the warmth disappeared. And by then, it wasn't regret I wanted. It was distance. So I ask you now, was I wrong? Was I cruel to step away from a family that never saw me as one of their own? Or was it the only honest thing left to do? Tell me, if you were erased after 15 years of sacrifice, would you have stayed?